Well, let's go ahead and get started with our meeting. Hal will mute everybody except for our guest speaker, please.
Done?
Today's guest speaker is Bob Gaston. He was with us last week, and he's going to talk to us about Mount St. Helens. And so
Jim has got
turn it over to you, Bob.
Jim's got a formal introduction as program chair.
Does he?
Yeah.
How about we go to Jim for the formal introduction?
Listening to you, Leroy. What are you talking about?
You have a formal introduction of Bob Gaston. Are you?
Yeah. Our guest speaker today is the same guest speaker we had last week. And it is Bob Gaston, who was the managing editor for the news division at the Daily News for many years, from 72 to 93 or somewhere along there, maybe 99. But he was the editor when Mount St. Helens blew. And as you will find out, I'm sure he'll tell you, but I'll tell you, you know, they won the Pulitzer Prize for the coverage of that event. And so he's going to join us, and he has some slides and a very good narration about what happened 40 years ago. So here we have Bob Gaston, I hope. And here we have Bob Gaston. Bob Gaston is here.
Coming. Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
All right. And do you see what we've got here? Here we go. You see he's covering Mount St. Helens. Did you see the picture?
Yes, yeah.
You do.
Sure.
All right. And it fills the screen. Okay. So the 40th anniversary is I'm sure you know, is 6 days away. And so I'm going to do a couple things today. I'm just going to we'll give an overview of what happened in the initial initial couple of weeks, basically, and how we covered it. And so you get a review of what happened. If you were around, you probably remember a lot of it, but I'm sure some of the pictures and headlines will remind you of other events that happened on that amazing day for our communities. And so we'll do that. And I will also, as we go, I wanted to talk about the difference in the daily news between then and now. Social factors. I'm not being critical of anybody who works there. Okay. And I want you to understand that if the paper would be dramatically different today, even if the Mcclellan family, Ted Nat still owned it, because the revenue has plummeted. So it would be dramatically different from what it is. I do think it would be better, but it would be still a shadow of its old self. And as we go, please, if you have questions, just please ask them. Anything you see causes prompts a question, go ahead. And I'm going to set my timer here and make sure that I don't go too long, because it's normally an hour. It's an hour presentation, so I want to make sure, but I'm not going too long. So Hal, you can tell me if I go too long too. So that's what we'll do. And this is how it looked on May 18th, that morning, when Roger Worth hopped a plane and grabbed that amazing photo. And that photo was in the next week's Time magazine, because we had a guy with the company who had connections with magazines, and so he got that on Time magazine. So that was nice. Got some money from it, and we shared it with Roger, and he bought himself a used BMW. So that was cool. He deserved it. So let's review quickly the blast impact. With we lost 1,300 feet blown off. The crater floor dropped 3,400 feet, and the speed of the lateral blast was 300 miles an hour, 660 degrees. It wiped out 230 square miles. So then we had the landslide when the north face fell off. So it was just an amazing event, and it continues to be really interesting to study. Andre, who was with us at the time as a rookie reporter, has stayed there, and he's done a great job with a very small staff of reviewing what's happened since then. He's just I've been very impressed with what he's been able to do in terms of recapping some of the major events, plus really interesting stories about how that mountain has been studied since then. So that kind of gives you an overview of the impact. When we're going to talk about the newspaper, the gentleman here owned the newspaper. The older man is John Mcclellan Sr., who came in 23. And he died in February of 1981, and so sad because he loved his newspaper, and if he had been around in April, he would have realized that we won the Pulitzer Prize. So it was kind of bittersweet. It had been wonderful to have Mr. Mack with us when that happened, because he was really interested in the paper. And in fact, on Tuesday the 20th, after our Monday edition came out, that he was in a wheelchair. He was 95 years old. They brought him in the newsroom, and he told us he just thought we did a great job of covering the mountain on that first day. And it was just really wonderful to hear. So this was his son, John Jr. Many of you know that he owned the paper for a long time, and up until 1986, actually. And then Ted got the paper when Mcclellan Jr. decided to sell out Longview Publishing Company, which at that time was the Bellevue Journal American, Port Angeles, Longview, half of Cableview. And he just thought it was time to sell. I think he had some foresight because he got a good price for it. Today, he would not. Anybody selling newspapers today will not get a good price for it. So Ted and the employees bought the Daily News. And employees chipped in because there was an employee stock ownership trust that owned a Longview Publishing Company, and actually the employees owned 38% of that company. And Ted and his brother and the Daily News employees actually bought the paper. We each owned roughly 1/3 of the newspaper when it's sold again in 1999. So let's get back to the mountain. This is, many of you have seen this view. It's was from the YMCA camp. I took it. I don't know what year, but it was. That was just magnificent to be up there at the Y camp, and we all know what a beautiful place that was. Now, our coverage really began long before May 18th, of course, because actually our first story was March 24, when there were some earthquakes up there, and then quickly we learned that it was going to we did have an eruption. And of course, one of the real characters, Harry, made national news because he was such a character, and so that was one of our many feature stories covering him. Of course, he died up there, and then March 27th was the first eruption, and we thought, oh wow, that's just amazing! Look at that hole. I forget how big it was, more than several football fields. I think we described it. It just seemed absolutely astounding at the time, and of course it would look like small potatoes later. among our stories, we were up there. We had reporters up there who were almost all the time we could get near there. And this is before it was closed off. And this is David Johnston, who of course died the morning of the blast. And back then he was saying he had this quote: "Mount St. Helens was a keg of dynamite with a lit fuse," and how right he was, and so sad he died up there. Kept going up to see Harry, and he refused to leave. And it was great to go up and talk to him, because he knew about the earthquakes, and he saw some of the eruptions. We had several eruptions before the big blast. This is really the first visually spectacular eruption, and you can see that one of our big problems in covering the mountain was that almost so often it was covered in clouds. But so this is the best picture we could get. Now, I wanted you to look at this front page and see. It gives you an idea of how aggressively we covered it. The little volcano index there tells the different stories that we had that day about the previous day's eruption. So we covered it. This is the biggest story, local story Longview's ever had, and so we wanted to cover it aggressively, and we had 11 city-side reporters at the time. There are now 5 and sometimes 4 city-side reporters. We had a feature staff of 3, and we put them to work covering the mountain. There were a lot of feature stories to write about the mountain, and so we had a feature staff of 3. For years and years, there's been no local feature people at the Daily News. The This Day section you may be familiar with is no more. Well, it's still there, but it's mostly wire news. And so we wanted to educate people about the volcano and what St. Helens might do. The geologists were great to work with. We had a reporter there at the time who was really into volcano coverage, and she said, the more I learned about the volcano, the more I feared it. So she kind of had an idea that this could be nasty. You might recall that after a time, authorities closed off access to the mountain. And a lot of us were mad. A lot of people were mad about that. Local people and tourists that wanted to get up there and see it. But it was turned out to be a good thing to do. And the volcano made international headlines and generated all sorts of local stories. Here's a feature story about people camping out near the mountain, and this woman happens to be from Germany. Okay, May 17th, that was a Saturday, just before the blast, and we had a photographer and 2 reporters go up to the mountain, to Spirit Lake, with homeowners who were allowed to go in. People who had cabins up there wanted to get some of their stuff out, and so I believe the state patrol led a caravan up there that afternoon. And oh my goodness, if there'd been a little earthquake that afternoon, we would have lost all kinds of people. We get so close to losing 2 reporters and our photographer, and the community would have lost. I don't know how many people were up there. For a lot of folks, who probably 100 or more, who went up get their get goods out of their possessions out of their cabins. And that day, this is the morning before. This is the afternoon before. There was a story about Harry Truman and his sister, and she was supporting him staying up there. There was a bit of controversy because he was really supposed to leave, but the sheriff let him stay. And here's Harry on his last afternoon at the mountain. And he was complaining, as he often did, about people coming up there and bothering him, I guess, or he thought they were. And you see the quote there. That's what he said that afternoon. Roger got a picture of him on his steps there in front of his lodge. About 8 o'clock the next morning, he was inundated. So this is the blast. This is Roger Worth's famous picture. We were a bit crippled for we only had one photographer that morning. We had a staff of 3 photographers, very good photographers. One of them, about a few weeks earlier, had left to take a job with National Geographic. He was that good. He left probably 2 weeks before the mountain blew. And then another photographer we had, he was at a funeral, a family funeral in Chicago when the mountain blew. Roger Worth, who had been up there that Saturday afternoon, he was told to go to bed. He had bronchitis. He was not feeling well at all. But he got a phone call from the pilot he flew with, and they went up there. They got up there real quick. He called me at home. He called me at home about less than 10 minutes after the mountain blew. He flew. He worked 36 straight hours. Roger did. And these are some of the pictures he got. These pictures. Well, first of all, I was able to spend any money we needed to. I was able to rent airplanes, helicopters at $400 an hour. That's $400 an hour back in 1980, mind you. And I never had anybody, any of the upper management complain about the cost. I didn't have to worry about that. And it was just wonderful. I mean, and then newsprint is expensive, but anytime we needed to, we could add 4 or 8 pages to the paper. And so we added, I guess we may have added 8 pages this day. I can't remember, because we had 45 stories as well as the pictures of the eruption that the next day on Monday, May 19th. And so Roger got these terrific photos because we had access to a helicopter, and we flew and flew and flew. I thought this was a pretty amazing picture. He got this just as the Coal Bank Bridge was wiped out by the all these logs that all these trees that were blasted down and blasted into the Toutle. Great picture. Here's another one. So these really help portray the enormity of the disaster. And this was a second front page on Monday. Again, look at the volcano index, and like I said, 45 pages. So we had two front pages that day. And Ted wrote a Views of the News. That was his front page column about what was going on. And by the way, Ted recognized early on that we really needed to get the Cowlitz River dredged before winter, else we were going to have lots of flooding in our Longview and Kelso. And he beat the drum for the Corps of Engineers to get going quickly. And I really credit Ted with calling attention to that and pushing forward. And I think he certainly helped get quick action from the Corps of Engineers. Wasn't long, and they were long before they were dredging in the summertime. Here's another picture. Stuff coming down, including parts of a bridge. Just amazing. Here's Harry Truman. We had the first interview, and the last interview was Harry on May 19th. And other stories about people who saw the mountain, and story about the homeowners getting out just in time. And that last interview with Harry. Sent a guy down to Cougar to see what was going on there, and that was kind of a waste because there wasn't much going on here. And that was Jay McIntosh, and he was our best. He was our best. He was really a good writer, but his talents were kind of wasted that day because he went south. There's some more from that day. This one is good before and after. More from the same day. We even had stories about, what happened with our water use in town. Lexington was evacuated. People moved back. Columbia was closed to ships. We were interviewing for our position. We were interviewing a photographer for our opening, and his name was Eugene Louie, and he didn't bring a camera with him, but we gave him a spare camera we had, and instead of interviewing him, we had him take pictures. He was working at Texas at the time, at a newspaper, and he had this fantastic experience, and he couldn't go home and tell anybody about it because he didn't want people at the paper to know he was looking for a job. And Bob Martinson, we hired him the day after the eruption, and he tracked missing people. Bob was coming in for an interview anyway, and we didn't bother interviewing him. We just needed him, and he turned out to be a great reporter and a really good editor. So this is on May 20th. So he wrote the story about the dead and missing. Tracking the missing was a huge job. That was a full-time job. It was really a complicated process. A lot of people on there shouldn't have been. They really weren't missing, but they were reported as missing because their family hadn't heard from them. So that was a big part of it. Flew again on Monday, and this couple they were geologists, and they stayed up there that night, and they died. We had a story in, so we had just a lot more stories about survivors. And we just couldn't get all the stories. There were so many stories, and we just couldn't get to all of them. And the first day, they thought that all that crud that came down and filled the Toutle might break and would send massive wall of mud and water down the Toutle. And actually, they said if Mount St. or if Spirit Lake had broken out, we could have had 10 feet of mud at the Hotel Monticello. And then Wednesday, more stories. And then the president comes to town, and he helped put this whole event into some perspective for us. He said, "This is the worst thing I've ever seen." He flew over and looked at it. And this is the first photo. The mountain was socked in for so long, and then this is the first photo of the mountain and seeing, wow, what really happened up there, the crater. I remember when I saw that photo, I was, holy cow. So that was on May 23. And then, it had all these stories, and I thought we really needed to have one story to wrap up the whole week and give some perspective to what happened in a review. And I asked Jay McIntosh to do that because he was just really a good writer and reporter. And so I asked him to do that, and he had worked 10 and 12-hour days. And so he went home that night, or he went home that afternoon, slept some, came back, and worked all night. And this was a really good story that kind of put it in perspective. Andre, I said we hired Andre Stepankowski as a rookie. That was in 79. He promised me he'd stay 18 months. He's still here, and he's the city editor. And he really grew. I wondered for a while if we had hired the right guy or not when we hired him, because he just kind of struggled. He came out of grad school, and covering these stories, he quickly got better and better, and for years he became our Volcano reporter after things calmed down. He's very good reporter, good writer. The ash, remember when ash fell the next day? We had enough staff so that we could do some in-depth stories. And Linda Wilson, we set her free for, almost a week just to work on one story about this couple that died in the eruption. A really good in-depth story about them and what happened to them. This story helped put a face on the. You just gave some humanity to the numbers of like 57 dead. So it was wanted to cover it that way too, and then we just continued to follow up from time to time. Well, follow it up almost every day. With more and more incredible pictures and stories. 12 days after the blast, Roger Worth photographed the new Spirit Lake full of logs. Really nice photograph. Roger's very good photographer. And this shows, again, enormity of the blast. And and Dick Pollock was our editorial writer. And Dick knew Hollywood Gorge and the Toutle River, and so this 2 months later, I said, Dick, why don't let's fly you up there and tell us what you recognize. And so he wrote a really good story about how things had changed and what it used to be like and what it's like today. Okay, August. Still covering, and here's the dredges are at work all over the place. Followed the dredging, kept updating the dredging effort because the conditions changed rapidly. So we kept following this. This is feature stories on the dredging work. Big news all summer. And you can see that photograph. We said, that's really a nice photograph of that worker. And we had good photographers to document this. And did a little map showing the geography, how it changed. This was in September, October, 5 months after the blast. Still, the volcano was making scary page one news. There would be it could be massive erosion and flooding. So this was such a big story to our community. I mean, it just wasn't the blast itself and that particular day or the first few weeks. I mean, the volcano continued to be a huge threat to our community, and we wanted to cover that. And we had, Bonker and our 2 senators came to town to talk about the federal government's response, which Ted continued to harp on. And then we examined the politics of the volcano and what would happen with the area up there. So we know it's become a national volcanic monument, but we didn't know at the time what might be going on. So we did stories about that, about the politics of the volcano. In 1982, I was up there with Roger and Andre and Dave Rorden and no, I don't know who else was up. Oh, Dave Conley. And that's the day we learned that if Spirit Lake wasn't drained, it could bury us 20 feet in mud. And that's when then we built the tunnel to drain Spirit Lake, which I guess still needs some maintenance work now. Because if that breaks loose, it's gonna cause havoc down here. So the story continues even to today, 40 years later. So I've taken enough time now, I think. So if you have questions, it's 12:37. If you have some questions about this or about the paper and how it's changed, I will take them.
Raise your hand so I can unmute you, I hope. Questions? Oh, there we got. Where did they go? First hand was Pat's laptop. There we are.
Who's that couple that stayed up in that trailer up where they were watching the mountain all the time? What was the name of that couple?
Watching the mountain all the time. I'm not sure I know. Maybe somebody else.
Up there because my parents used to go up there and see them every once in a while. They used to. They had them on Volcano Watch up there in the trailer, but they got out of there in time. But I can't remember what their name was.
I don't either. Sorry.
I unmuted everybody, so try to not mumble in the background. Go ahead.
Hey, Bob, did you have any pictures of the logging activities up there at Weyerhaeuser Camps?
Yes, we did. Afterwards, yes, that was visit. You mean after the eruption?
Yes.
Yes, I know. And yeah, and stories about how that they go through a chainsaw in a day or two. Yes, right.
We have those in your program there?
No, I don't.
What other questions out there? Kurt?
I had a question about that last comment you made about Spirit Lake. There's a potential for it to still cause a disaster down here. Can you explain that?
Well, yes, the most damage that comes from a volcano is not necessarily from that blast, it's from the mud flows and what comes down.
Right.
So if we have all this material in the ash in the Toutle River, and if the Spirit Lake were to breach, it doesn't breach now because we have that mile-long tunnel to drain it safely. If it were to breach, the geologists told us we would have 10 to 20 feet of mud at the Monticello, Hotel Monticello.
Right.
That's what they said,
And that mile-long tunnel, you said it needs some maintenance, or it needs...
Yeah, that's been some stories lately, and all I know is what I read in the paper, but there's some, yeah, that's all I know. And I know that there's concern about it.
Yeah. Ken?
Yeah, Bob, one thing that I kind of would like to insert a little bit here is when we had the volcano come down, the Calif River, And it closed off the Columbia River for a couple of weeks where we had no shipping or no access to anything because of the mud flow.
I know. Yeah, and that was one of the stories we had. And I remember we had an error in the first day or second day coverage about that. The headline said that Columbia might be closed for a year. So in the rush to get off the paper, we had that headline that was wrong. So I remember that story because of the error in the headline.
Well, there's three of us here that are former Longview City Council members on this call.
Yeah.
Each one of us had to deal with it differently. Mm-hmm. I happened to be on the council in 1980 when they brought the dredge in for the water system. Mm-hmm. And Lloyd Inman said we should never lose that dredge. We should repair it because it came in under an emergency order and it can stay forever as long as we maintain it. And we all know where the water situation has gone since then.
Yes.
And I got to tell you guys, it was clear. It was clear. So
they didn't maintain the bridge.
Any more questions there? I'm looking around. Jim, you know something or not? No. I don't see any more hands out there. Oh, Marilyn.
Well, I'm just wondering if Bob Piper would be willing to share his experience.
Oh.
Bob, are you?
Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't that exciting other than I lived on the Klamath River at the time. And we didn't even know it erupted. My brother from Seattle called us to tell us that it erupted. He wanted to know if we were all right. What's going on?
Yes.
So, I mean, we drove up to see it, and where we could up the river, we got a good view of it. But then a day later, I think it was, or that night, we came home. We'd gone somewhere and came back, and about a half a mile before our house, some guys from National Guard stopped us. And first time I'd ever been stopped by a National Guard guy, and wanted to know where we were going. And I said, I live a half mile up there, and I showed him my ID and let me go by. But yeah, nothing really exciting happened to us until, what was it, a week later when we had the dust fall. It fell down, and they evacuated us again then and said we had to stay out until everything settled down.
Yeah. My mother called me from Port Orchard because she heard the blast, heard the news, and was afraid we'd all died. And we didn't know it exploded. And I turned to my wife, and my brother was in college at that time. And we looked out the window and went, "Oh yeah, there is a big plume." And it's
Hey Hal.
Yes, sir.
I was a road engineer at Road 12 when that mountain blew.
Oh my goodness.
And experienced all the aftermath of the logging equipment, cleanup and what have you. It was quite an ordeal.
And then there's Phil and the animals.
I actually have a question for Bob. Bob, would you talk a little bit about the economic impact of ash falling to the east of the state?
I didn't pay any attention to what was going on east of the state. We had enough to keep track of. Sorry.
Well, I was at a national or Association of Western Cities. I think it was in June or July, and we were up in the Bellevue area, and many of the city managers and council members came up to that meeting, and the most memorable one was from the Moses Lake city manager. They got a call from Department of Ecology, and they heard that Moses Lake was putting ash into the lake, Moses Lake, and they wanted them to stop it. And the quick thinking city manager said, "Why don't you come over and find us? And oh, by the way, bring shovels."
I have comments on Eastern Washington.
Yes.
Well, we actually lived in Yakima at the time. I have a great photo of Steve up on top of our roof, shoveling ash off of the roof. It was warm, and when it happened, it was like we thought a thunderstorm was happening in the west. And of course, that dark cloud continued to move over, and our sunshine eventually went away. Some of you may know this, but we were attending church, and our pastor hurried up the message because he'd gotten a phone call from the airport fire station saying that it had blown. But by the time we got outside, we had to use our wipers to drive home. It was completely dark, ash. Our 3-year-old claimed that his daddy smoked too much. At the time, Dad did smoke. But I don't know if it really impacted us too much economically. Steve has a great story where he was running a restaurant, and it was a truck stop. So, of course, the truckers were stranded, and his restaurant could not run the fans because it would suck in the ash. So they had to serve cold sandwiches and as much what you could do soups and.
We ended up in a day and a half going through 95 loaves of bread because we couldn't use our grills. It was we had probably 250 truckers stuck. We were told not to move, and it didn't really start movement until a couple days later when it rained and everything settled. But Yakima, I think we got about a half an inch of the ash.
Wow.
It was quite a treat.
It stayed dark for quite a while that fell.
Yeah. Okay, then. I don't see any more hands or comments coming around.
Al?
Yes.
This is Bob.
Yeah.
Just wanted to show what I found. I still got this.
You're good. I have some too.
Yeah. Yes, Cindy?
When the mountain blew, we didn't know, we hadn't heard anything about it going to blow. And my son came in, he's like 2 years old, and he goes, "Mommy, it's snowing outside." And I go, "Can't be snowing outside, it's May." And he goes, "Mommy, it's snowing." So we get up, and sure enough, it was the ash falling. And the transformers were just sparking like crazy all over our street. And we had one of those in-ground transformers, and it blew and the ground all kind of erupted around that. So it was quite an experience.
Okay. Anybody else? Leroy.
Thank you, Bob. That's interesting.
You're welcome.
Bring back memories. Can't believe it's been 40 years.
Yeah.
Crazy. To get to some business,
Wait a
just a
minute.
reminder, we'll be having
James? Uh-oh.
No, I was gonna thank our guest speaker and tell him that there is a application for membership in the mail, and he will hear from me further.
and his second class mug.
Thank you very much, Bob.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This group doesn't usually pay as much attention to presentation, but they're usually looking at their own picture. But you had to know about. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Bye.
So we have a board meeting on May 21st at noon. Be on Zoom. So I think Cindy will be sending out the link for that. Will you be Cindy, or is it Hal? It will be Cindy.
Yes.
So watch for the link for the board meeting for May 21st. If the board members, committee chairs have anything to get on the agenda, I'll be sending out something as a reminder, email.
Taste of Italy will be on
Does
there.
anybody, pardon me?
Taste of Italy will be on there.
Okay.
The agenda.
Does anybody have anything, anything from the newsletters? I mean, nothing, Cindy? I see.
There's going to be a virtual I sent it up in the newsletter this last time. It's the Lions Club Virtual Club Officer Learning for MD19, and that's going to be on May 27th. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You have to register by May 27th. And May 30th. So officers or those coming in might want to look into that. And I put the email on there to be able to register. So take a look at that. It seems like it would be a very good experience of learning. So
right. So we have Carrie Ann and Phil asking questions.
Carrie Ann? Where you at?
Excuse me. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry. I just wanted to remind everyone about the grocery outlet. We are helping deliver the groceries. It's donation, and they are looking to have donations sent to help them. So if you guys need additional information, if we all just pitched in a little bit, it'd make quite a difference for them. So let me know if you have any questions.
How many were delivered last Friday?
I think it was about 74.
Cool. Wow.
And donations are
this Friday.
So donations are still being made. A check, give it to Dolly with grocery outlet on the memo.
Yes. So checks payable to Pioneer Lions. So we're keeping track of hours and funds donated. Those can be sent, dropped off to Dolly, to the Lions PO box, and she's checking the mail. She's collecting all the money and then writing a check over to the grocery outlet specifically for that, so we can keep track of all of that.
Great. Phil, you have something?
I just wondered if anyone has, we heard a week ago about Skip Minsker possibly undergoing a important heart procedure. I was wondering if anybody had an update.
He's doing fine. He's up walking around, joking. We live right across the street from him.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so he's doing fine. He's home.
Okay,
thank you.
We have Gordy and Sharon with their hands up.
Well, pick one.
Gordy, go.
Okay, Cindy, can we throw away our Taste of Italy tickets?
I have to reserve until our board meeting on Thursday.
Okay, let us know.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Sharon?
Oh, Sharon?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, that training thing, anybody can do that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then also the hours that I did for helping out on Friday, the delivery, who am I supposed to be turning that into, or was it already accounted for by somebody that was there?
Yep, I got it.
Okay.
It was the fish stuff that needs to go to Phil.
Just email it to him?
You know, any volunteer hours of any kind, please send them to me.
Okay.
Well, isn't Carrie Ann doing that?
I haven't gotten an email of those hours.
Yeah, no, I'm keeping track of it, but didn't know to send it to you, Phil. So yeah. I can just send you an email.
Okay,
awesome. Sharon did fish also.
Yep.
And that needs to go to Phil.
Just to give you an example of what kind of stuff we can report, Vicky is moved to Redmond, Oregon, and she is a volunteer for hospice down there, but she's still a member of our club. And her volunteer hours at hospice in Redmond, Oregon are reportable by us as volunteer service.
Oh. Carrie Ann.
Anybody else have another question?
Somebody say Isla.
Oh.
When we're back in the real world and I start working at the hospital again as a volunteer, those hours count?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Gordy. At the next board meeting, is trying to generate revenue going to be one of the items discussed?
Maybe so.
It's a good thought.
Yeah.
I think it's a really big thought.
Yeah. What?
You stumped us, Gordy. Yeah.
Donna?
I have a
Donna.
Carrie Ann, does grocery outlet need any help putting the groceries into the bags?
They have been so organized. Oh my goodness, you wouldn't even believe it. But not that I've heard. I can check in. I'm supposed to talk to Michelle in the next day or so to give me a count for this week, just to let me know if she needs help this week too. So I can ask her that, and I can keep it posted.
I don't have anything better to do.
Okay. I've got lots more to do over here.
You move.
Monday morning need help packing and unpacking.
Unpacking.
You can help us TP the place that the Boteros are going to move into.
Yes.
Taking care of the mud and the graffiti, but we need help with the toilet paper.
Gina?
Carrie Ann?
Yeah. I just wanted to share that I had a conversation with Bob Bradley. He's actually going over to the Eagles every day between 3 and 5 and checking the mail and doing things that need to be done around the Eagles there. And they so far have been able to keep up with things, but they only paid half their taxes, and so now they're struggling to be able to meet all of their obligations. And I told him that I would share this with the group if he didn't mind. But we've been meeting there for a while now, and those guys are hurting, and so I wanted to share that so we could be thinking about what we might be able to do for the Eagles.
Yep.
Hey, Ryan.
Marilyn.
I just wanted to thank those who are attending the Zoom meeting today that have made phone calls to fellow members. Cindy added most of the comments in the roar, and several of you that have been attending every Zoom meeting, we haven't actually had you on the calling list. So send me an email if you want someone to talk to, and I will put someone on that call for you. But it's been good, so don't hesitate to read all those, and I have some updates for next week as well.
Well, Kurt's got to be pretty lonely, you know.
Kurt?
Yeah. How's court been, Kurt?
I've had a couple of hearings on Zoom. And quite a few court call hearings. And this is going to be permanent. The court system is changing. Everything's going to be electronic. I'm not sure how they're going to do jury trials and criminal trials, but I guess they'll figure that out. But for now, the court system is going to video and phone, and it's going to stay that way.
It's kind of interesting. There's the Judge series called All Rise. They actually filmed their last version as if it were all that on Zoom, and it was hilarious.
My favorite show.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
So I've still been having hearings at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays. I don't have one today. It's actually at 2:30, but that's why I've had to miss some of these. These are great.
Yeah.
And thanks for doing this.
Hi, Kim. Did you want me to come this Friday again?
I'm gonna talk to Michelle in the next day or so. Last week they didn't have that many for this week yet, but I think it, just changes day to day. So I'll double check and then send an email out, to everyone that's interested. So maybe just shoot me an email or text or something, and then I can respond to that to let you know if they're needed or not.
Okay. And I just wanted to add that I was really impressed last week how organized it was.
Yeah.
Even the envelopes with the addresses, how they were, the time that was put into them to make sure they're all in the same area. It was really, really, really well done.
Yes, I agree. They did a fabulous job, and you guys too.
Okay, Bob, Justin, and Ken.
What is the cutoff day for Dolly to call over to Grocery Outlet to determine how many we're going to give away that week? I mean, is there a day?
So Dolly is just taking care of the funds, and I've been going either Thursday late or Friday to pick up a check from her. So right now I'm just delivering that weekly. She'll check the mail, let me know how much is in there. I'll go pick up a check and bring it to Grocery Outlet. So that's how we're handling it. I suppose kind of depending how long this happens, that might change a little bit to make it a little easier, but we'll play it by ear.
Ken?
We're out of time. I'll send something. I want something on Leroy's agenda for the board meeting, just to thank Isla Hoosters who's stepping in at the district level.
What? I'm what?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we are up to time. So thank you all for joining. Reminder.
Stay here.
Hi.
Marilyn.
I just want to thank Cindy.
We're out of here.
I think she's done a tremendous.
Everybody's raising their hands.
I'm saying goodbye.
That's it.
It's a wave.
This has been really fun.
Thank you, Hal. Never thought I'd say that, but thank you, Hal.
Hey, you're welcome.
So good
What's
to
our
see
program for
everybody.
next week?
Well, look at me.
Yes,
Awards.
Towards meeting? Okay. Awards?
The scholarship meeting or something, I think.
Oh, scholarship next week.
Next week's scholarship, Sandy
Okay.
Cat.
Okay. So Marilyn, are they going to coordinate with me?
I will send Sandy an email.
Okay, that's right. Sandy's not here this time.
Okay. I'll note that. See you guys.
Okay.